Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, guys. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulty. Good afternoon. Today is week number 4 of Facing Fears, and this week we're going to be talking about the fear of judgment. And I am Bonnie Barclay. I am the owner of Creekside Counseling and Wellness. So, welcome. So, judgment will happen, it is unavoidable. And hurtful words can come from anywhere, right? I mean, colleagues, teachers, parents, in laws, siblings, employers, friends. And for many of us, it's easy to really take this in and internalize their criticism. Taking it to heart, we can start believing that there must be something wrong with us, questioning our own sense of self. We might respond with defensiveness and aggression, lashing out, fighting criticism with criticism, shame with shame. Or we could feel powerless and try to pat down the hurt and ignore it, staying quiet and continuing to allow ourselves to be spoken about in this way. Perhaps we respond passive aggressively, complaining behind their back. And where does this lead us? Right back to a place of shame. And we've talked about this. Shame is that toxic feeling where we feel bad about ourselves as a person instead of bad about our actions, which is guilt, or our efforts, which is regret. We feel bad about who we are. Do you recognize the shame reactions that I just mentioned from what we talked about last week with the shame cycle? There are 4: withdrawal, attacking the self, avoidance, or attacking others. So let's unpack this key fear today: fear of judgment, or how others refer to it as the negative evaluation from others. That's what we fear, that negative evaluation, and how this too can trigger the shame cycle. So today I'm going to be referencing some of Brene Brown's work. She's a social worker, author, shame researcher. She's done so much to challenge the way that we look at shame and vulnerability, both personally and in our larger culture. And you can find a lot of her work through books and TED Talks if you want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. She often refers to Theodore Roosevelt's 1910 speech, The Man in the Arena, when talking about her research. And I added underneath the invitation for today, I put in the comments, The Man in the Arena, if you guys want to go look at that. It's really powerful. And she really brought that back to life in so many ways in her work. I encourage you all to read it and think about what we talk about today, considering who is in the stands and who is in your arena with you. And we all have different arenas, right? Parenthood, career, all these different areas of our life where we might have people in the arena with us and people in the stands. So, this fear of judgment, how it can trigger this shaky feeling of being seen, being vulnerable. And we've all been affected at some point in our lives by something someone else has said about us. Again, words can be hurtful and leave us feeling powerless and vulnerable. In time, people's words and perceptions of us can actually shape our own beliefs about ourselves, those self referential beliefs. And this is something as an EMDR therapist that is at the core of what we address in therapy. This can lead to fear of judgment by others and infringe on so many aspects of our lives as we navigate through relationships, jobs, social situations, even self care. If you've ever worried that poor performance in an evaluation will lead a friend or colleague to developing a negative opinion of you, then you're not alone. Athletes may fear judgment if they don't win a race. Students may dread the disappointment of others upon failing an exam. And professionals may worry that a work project will be criticized. So, what do? We armor up, layering that armor up every morning when we get up, assume certain roles. Why? To avoid shame, anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. Basically, all the things we've been discussing this month with this fear series, right? What can that look like? Being an overachiever, perfectionism, having a really strong inner critic to prevent that negative evaluation. It really tries to keep us in line or keep us small. People pleasing, the always available one, the underfunctioning one, staying small to avoid that criticism or judgment, the self-reliant one. All of these are survival roles, and there are many of them. This is the way we've worked out who it is we need to be in order to receive attention, approval, love, and validation, or to avoid things like conflict, criticism, stress, disappointment, rejection, abandonment. Everything we do is about getting or avoiding those things. All of these types of armor can make us feel safe and, my favorite, in control in the moment. But they're really doing us more harm than good. When you armor up against vulnerability, you then shut yourself off from other things that can potentially be positive for you. Is the fear of judgment keeping you from living to your full potential? Is this fear keeping you small or cutting off certain positives that could come to life in your life? If so, it is time to call BS. Our brain does not always give us the best information, right? We've been talking about this. We have to be able to lean in with curiosity to what our brain is telling us. To grow, it takes showing up. It takes moving outside of your comfort zone. How? Brace yourself. Vulnerability. Being seen. What is going to show up in terms of judgment? Let's unpack it a little bit deeper. Shame, we've been talking about that. It's the biggie. The I am something, that a negative evaluation, which we've been talking about. It's hard. Shame is this intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. That something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. And then what happens? It's natural to want to keep this part of us secret, to exile it, to section it off, to hide it. We are wired for connection and belonging, yet our brain is telling us, no way. Vulnerability is too risky. In a lot of ways, it's viewed as weak. And that leaves us with fear. The second thing, comparison, which we have discussed, that this automatically sets us up for failure because we are comparing our unique gifts, talents, strengths, and weaknesses to someone else's. And we're all different. That's why that comparison automatically sets us up to fail. What about shame's twin? I call the twin self-doubt. And this is that moment when you start to feel good or confident about something and you get blindsided by self-doubt with that, what are you thinking? What were you thinking? You are getting, as Brene says, too big for your britches. That foreboding joy of waiting for the other shoe to drop, that this isn't going to last. Shame is carried silently and secretly for fear of judgment, yet it is the self judgment, that inner critic, that grows the longer we conceal our vulnerability. See the no win here? Secrecy fuels shame, but if we tell our secret and share our weaknesses, we become vulnerable and then we face uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's that unsafe feeling we get when we step out of our comfort zone or do something that forces us to loosen control. Loosen control. And then our brain fires again, says no way. So what's underneath criticism? Criticism, these critical behaviors that we get involved in, arise from a place of fear and feeling unworthy. In fact, Brené has found that we judge people in areas that we are vulnerable to shame ourselves. Let me repeat that. We judge people in areas where we are vulnerable to shame ourselves. It's again when we talked about those triggers and those channels of perception, those stories that we have in our channel. And when we judge others, it's usually because we have that in our channel of perception. Criticism is used as an armor to shift the spotlight away from the critic and onto something or someone else, leaving the critic feeling a sense of safety and superiority many times. The goal isn't to become immune to feeling hurt by criticism, but we do need to recognize when someone's criticism is really about their own stuff. And it's not actually about you. It's about their story, their fears, their survival skills. What we need in those moments is to respond, not react, explore our power through assertive communication and boundaries. I mean, that's really where our power is. We can't control the perception of others. We can't control or change other people. Our power is in our own communication and our own boundaries. Most importantly, we need to get clear on whose opinions really matter to us and whose do not. So you can let everything else fall at your feet and move through it without taking it in, without internalizing it or stepping into a survival role. And I posted yesterday, one of the great sayings that I love by Brené is, don't try to be a jackass whisperer. I mean, we all know what a horse whisperer is. You know, they calm the beast. Dog whisperer, calm the beast. Do not be a jackass whisperer. There's a difference between fitting in and belonging. In fact, fitting in is one of the greatest barriers to belonging. And I think this is so important, especially with adolescents, preteens and adolescents, to know this difference, for us to teach and talk about this difference. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. And that is a beautiful quote by Brené in her book, Daring Greatly. How do you combat this? There are 6 keys I'm going to talk about. Number 1, know your shame triggers. Think about the messages that keep you small. That inner critic. What are those messages? Where did they come from? What's your story driving this? How can you attend to that with a healing mind and a compassionate mind? which leads us to number 2, self-compassion. Kristen Neff, the self-compassion guru, talks about how there's a paradox that lies at the heart of self-compassion. We give ourselves compassion not to feel better, but because we feel bad. And that's a hard one in our culture. We all want to feel better, but sometimes that's not where growth lies. This may make you scratch your head and say, what? But this is what paradoxes are about. It's an important principle to understand in order for self-compassion to be effective. We give ourselves compassion not to feel better, but because we feel bad. When we are kind and supportive to ourselves in a moment of suffering, if we use self-compassion as a way, instead of using self-compassion as a way to sugarcoat or resist the reality of pain in the moment, it's going to backfire on us. Whatever we resist persists or grows stronger. We have to be in that moment of suffering with ourselves rather than using it to make us feel better or sugarcoat. We learn from those moments of suffering when we lean into them. We must accept the reality that right now, in this moment, it hurts. People can hurt us. And then say to that hurting part of ourselves, I hear you, see you, and I'm making a decision to do it anyway. See, self-compassion isn't about staying small, but it is about understanding where that hurt's coming from, giving appropriate attention to that, and then making a decision what we want to do. That hurt part owns the narrative born of past trauma or distressing events. We need to have compassion and then step into our new narrative, the adult narrative, based on our values. So number 3, know what is important to you. That is why you do what you do. So clarify your values. Allow them to guide you, not the negative voice of others. Number 4, know your own voice. Sometimes you are your own biggest critic. This may have protected you in the past, but it's no longer serving you. Now it is keeping you small. Number 5, know who is on your team of allies, your real supports who pick you up, dust you off, slap you on the back for your courage, and then at times give you constructive feedback when you need it. Prioritize them in your life. They already see you, your strengths, your weaknesses, and they're already there for you. So Brene Brown talks about this concept called the Square Squad. It's a tool that Brene suggests using to help you determine who is your team of allies. So she instructs folks to take a 1-inch square of paper. And that is so telling, 1 inch. And list the people whose opinions really matter to you. This list is purposely very small. You're only looking for people who love you for your strengths and struggles. These people will both pick you up and respect you enough to tell you when you are acting in a way that is not in alignment with who you really are, your values. They know you. No one gets a free pass onto this list, not even family, not even your partner. They have to earn their place by meeting that criteria. 1 inch. Number 6, accept what you can and cannot control. You can't change or control the perception of others. So here's the hard truth. When we stop caring about what people think, we lose our capacity for connection and we lose out on important feedback. Numbing is not healthy. When we become defined by what people think, we lose our willingness to be vulnerable. So, guys, somewhere between not caring and numbing, right? And not taking things so to heart that we need to be, that we're allowing people to define who we are and what we do. That middle path. Vulnerability is not a weakness. As you can tell from all we've talked about today, it takes tremendous courage. So, what is the takeaway for today? How can you look at just one of these keys to combat this fear of judgment and take action so you grow instead of staying small? Thank you so much for listening in. I'm hoping to start a new series in November about gratitude and a little bit probably about coping for the holidays. So I hope that will be helpful to you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.